So we are very, very excited about this B2B Uncut podcast. And it's going to be a little bit different. And I would encourage you to do a few things here. So first, how it's going to be different, right? It's going to be raw, live. We're going to talk about trends. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions. The panelists here, don't be shy, show your face, put us on the spot, okay? And then we will answer your questions. So this is one way we are going to be different. We really want it to be really engaging and not putting anything behind any kind of a curtain. Everything is out there. You can ask anything, and our panelists will obviously give you their point of view. Second, it's live, so we are all here. And again, I encourage you to show your face, be with us here. I think it'll be interesting, and the participation, obviously, that we are looking forward to it. And another thing is that we only have the 3 first webinars set up, the topics, and we are asking our audience to vote for topics that we're going to discuss in the future. You'll see information coming up from our marketing team asking for input. So please participate. We want to make sure that we discuss topics that matters to you. So that will be great if you can participate, and we'll make it a very informed and enriched experience to all of us. So as far as today podcast, it's going to be the first one in the series, and the topic of today is B2B e-commerce trends for 2022, the distinguishing signal from noise. And we have a great panelist today with us for the podcast. First, I would like to introduce Joe Cicman, Senior Analyst from Forrester. Joe helped e-businesses professionals assess, improve, and optimize B2B and B2B2C e-commerce technologies and strategies. Joe has worked in the B2B commerce since the late 90s and lived through multiple technology cycles. Prior to joining Forrester, Joe was the product manager who owned IBM's e-commerce offering. Joe joined IBM through the acquisition of Sterling Commerce, where he was a managing architect in the Sterling Professional Services Group and specialized in building and delivering asset-based and first-of-a-kind projects. Joe's experience is as hands-on leader who worked with hundreds of clients on projects, small and large, both directly and through his team of consultants. So thank you, Joe, for joining with us today. Our second panelist is Yoav Kutner. He's the founder and CEO of Oro Inc., the company behind Oro Commerce and Oro CRM and Oro Platform products. Prior to founding Oro, he was the CTO and co-founder of Magento, where he led product and technology development for all Magento offerings from inception until after its acquisition by eBay in 2011. Yoav is a proven product visionary in the business application market. So thank you, Yoav, for joining in. And
Hi,
I'm sure this will be a great podcast today. So let's start with kind of first an overview of what's going on in the market today, kind of high-level trends. Joe and Yoav will provide some of the trends that we see in the market, kind of on a high level. And then we're going to get to the second part of the podcast, which is going to be very interesting, and we'll touch on it in a second. Okay, so Joe, please, it's your podium right now.
All right, thanks, Motti, and hi everyone. Happy 2/2/2/2/2 Tuesday. I think this occurs every 100 or so years, so this is kind of a cool day. So I cover B2B e-commerce, marketplaces, and digital experience platforms here with Forrester, which is, it's 3 coverage areas, but there's, the Venn diagram overlapping them is super interesting. And yeah, as Motti mentioned, before I joined Forrester, I was a client of Forrester's, as I was, worked for years to try to SaaSify an e-commerce platform. So I've got some really fun battle scars from that. Trends, here's what I would sum up. This is about platforms that can keep up with brands that are experimenting to figure out what digital interactions work for their particular customers. And that's not a one-size-fits-all type of a thing. And there's lots of nuances across industries. So you can't really copy what other companies are doing. You can't really copy your competitors. And so what I tell clients is, you wouldn't take your neighbor's medication just because she's feeling better today. You got to do your own diagnosis. You got to figure out what you need, what your customers need from you. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of a whole lot of these buzzwords floating around. We're going to put it into context of what that means inside of the trends. So rather than going trends and then filling in the buzzwords, which is what a lot of folks out there on the internet will do, we're going to go buzzword by buzzword and put that in context of the trends. So now's your chance to put an analyst on the spot live. So please have fun with this. All right, Yoav, over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Joe. Again, excited to be here and join this discussion. I think it's something that we've been excited about for the last few years already. Like Joe, I think that we are figuring out a lot of things in B2B still. If I compare my previous experience at Magento, if we look at 2004, 2008 years, it feels like we're here again with B2B companies this time, trying to figure it out, trying to kind of separate or prioritize how they go about digitizing their business, digitizing the experience that they're giving to their customers. And we were actually pretty surprised once we started getting into this field that B2B companies are anywhere between 5 to 10 years even behind the technology curve. So a lot of this has to do with what they have to prioritize, where they have to invest. Like Joe said, where they actually experiment, learn, and try to build something that really works and gets them further on this path of digitizing their interactions with their customers, how they transform their business and sales operations into digital. And this is exciting times. I think this is something that really brings out the companies that are going to become the new leaders, are going to figure it out faster, and are going to start leading and paving the way for other companies to go digital in the B2B space. So again, exciting times. I think this discussion is something that we've been doing with customers, with partners in our community, and sometimes even with Joe, right? We get into these heated discussions when we talk. So definitely we'll have a lot of opinions, and we'd love to hear your opinions as well and learn from you as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe and Yoav, and we're just going to get right into it. The format would be that we we'll have a section for each kind of trend that we see in the market, and Yoav and Joe will chime in and give their opinion if it's a real signal or a noise. We would love to hear from you as well. So if there's anybody in the audience that would like to comment or to add something from his own experience, we would love to hear you. So please feel free to just jump in and kind of provide your input. So let's get just right into it. Let's get right into it. Headless, we hear about it a lot in the market today. And, there's a lot of discussions about headless, good, bad, or otherwise. So I'll let Joe start and give us his point of view on headless and what's going on in the market.
Yeah, well, headless is real, but it's a little bit difficult for people who aren't technical to wrap their head around it. And if you're buying ads on Google, I think I know the guy who made it expensive for you in the first place. All right, so I got a couple of things that I want to hit on this. So first, I'd say, I do get calls from investors, and they ask, hey, Joe, what is the TAM? What is the total addressable market for headless commerce? And my answer to them is, look, all commerce platforms are headless. Now, some have better APIs than others. What I mean by that is they have more productive APIs. But no one is going to fund a new software company with a technology strategy that tightly couples a fixed set of touch points to it. And so that's kind of what I say is this is just the way software is built anymore. So it's loosely coupled. And headless is kind of the first of the the first step in the great decoupling. Now, I also tell those investors, and I tell my other end user clients. So just real briefly, the type of clients that I work with. So I do work with investors. I work with vendors, people who have software to sell. And then I work with what Forrester calls end user clients, which are brands, manufacturers, people who have an e-commerce site. So I also tell all of them that the term headless is proving to be a very, very bad word. And here's what I mean by that. And this is a quote that I got from a vendor. You need headless commerce because there are so many heads you need to do commerce on. So imagine if you're a CFO getting that pitch. It doesn't make sense. It's not rational if you look at the words and you try to reason with the words. So the words aren't helping anyone reason through the business value of headless commerce. And I think it continues to get, as it prolongs, I have not heard a single pitch for headless that would work on a non-technical audience. Now, I'm looking for that one magical pitch, but that's the problem with headless, is if you're not technical and you're not initiated into it, it makes zero sense and it sounds ridiculous when people try to pitch it to you.
Okay.
So I actually agree with Joe on this, and I think headless is a term that's getting bigger and bigger noise in the B2B space, and I'll leave B2C a bit out of here. But what we've seen with a lot of trends, and I think the excitement about headless is that it's been overused, both in implementations. We actually see companies that are almost religiously saying that they have to go headless and ignoring what the problem at hand is. And I think, especially in B2B today, and this probably will be a recurring theme for me throughout this chat, is that we see a lot of times that technology is leading the problem solving rather than focusing on the problem at hand and figuring out what's the right solution for that. And one thing that I'll add to what Joe said, it's not all or nothing. So if you're just starting off, if you're just getting your feet wet and trying to get into the digital space and kind of transform how your company works, sometimes allowing, and saying this as a technologist, and it hurts me to say this sometimes, but saying this as a technologist, sometimes we kind of get hung on the how we're going to do it rather than what we need to do. And I think headless is a great example of this. Headless is almost as exciting as 15, 20 years ago when we were talking about separating the view and the controller. It's going to allow us more flexibility. It's going to give us faster time to market, move faster, innovate faster. But what we're seeing in reality is that you're just adding more technology to a solution in the end, because now you're separating it to n number of technologies that are consuming some business logic and trying to present it. That causes usually to more complexity, more time to market, more expensive solutions rather than quicker and faster as people think it will be. And my point is, again, if we have a great technology leader leading this project, I think the solution is not all or nothing. I think headless has a lot of benefits. We've seen implementations that we were working on where we were enabling B2B2C, for example, and allowing the B2C part of the B2B2C to consume in a headless manner, because every B2C implementation was using different technologies. That made a lot of sense for us. But if we're looking at a project where we're coming to a company and their first thing is even just to post their catalog online because they're not searchable or indexable, talking to them about headless is really kind of forcing it down their throat at that point, because the point is that they need to go online fast, they need to be searchable, they need to be indexable. How that's done is almost secondary to that. Now, again, I'm not saying leave any view or vision for the future development, but choosing a platform that will allow you to use headless where it makes sense and still work in other modular, et cetera, that we're going to talk about next, is the key. Again, just implementations that are just religiously saying headless, we're seeing that a lot of them actually fail. They take a lot longer to go to market at a much higher budget than intended, and that kind of beats the purpose, right? So again, I'll go on this that mostly right now for B2B, this is more noise. And again, I think that something that should remain in the technology discussion of how we implement the problem at hand or solve the problem at hand, rather than religiously saying we have to have headless and we have to go that approach.
That's so good, Yoav. I was imagining sitting in a dentist chair and having the dentist come in and tell me all the names of all their tools. And I would just prefer to have the gas and have a nice smile at the end of it. And I think a lot of these technologists, I think need to check their bedside manner.
Completely agree on that.
Okay. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to add anything? Any questions, follow-up questions from anyone? See, just checking. I don't see anything right now. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, the next trend we would like to discuss is composable, modular microservices. Yoav, I'll let you start this one.
Yeah, so again, just continuing the theme, these are more of the list of what a lot of companies will start hearing when they start looking at going into B2B commerce. And again, these are things that are not all or nothing in my head. It has to be implemented in a way that actually solves the problem at hand. I think modular today in today's world is expected. Let's start with that. I mean, no monolithic system is going to solve your problem out of the box, especially when we're talking about mid-market and larger enterprises. Off-the-shelf products in where we are today in B2B, again, is something that is a must. No two businesses are alike. That's something we learned early on in B2C, but we kind of standardized what you expect from a shopping cart, e-commerce website. So that a lot of it, you can say, we can use it off the shelf. We'll use some extensions, some customization. Where we see today B2B companies going, modular is a must. I mean, you have to be able to modularize your system, extend it, make it work for your business flows, business practices, and that's almost a must. But again, when we start digging into the next layer, should it be composable? Should it be microservices first, or stuff like that? We're really getting into where it cannot be all or nothing. It has to be the right solution for solving the problem. Microservices, again, it's a very nice term. We've been hearing about it a lot, and we've seen implementation. Again, it's nothing new. We were using services, and that's a way for us to kind of use somebody else's work to get a feature or a part of the project already done. And again, something that really brings us faster to market. But if it's, again, used solely as the architecture, we see that a lot of times this creates a lot of flexibility, a lot of extended development time and cost, and something that we definitely don't want to necessarily go all in on. What I will add to this is that a good approach or a good platform should allow you to use what they offer out of the box, or turn it off and replace it with a feature or a solution or a service that will do something better. So selecting a platform that gives you this flexibility to use composable, to use modular, to use microservices where it makes sense, and then use as much as you need out of the box, that's the way to go in my point, from my experience. We really see that those are more kind of successful kind of projects because they don't have to necessarily make all the decisions, let me say that, at day one. We can actually start with something that works, learn, get feedback from our customers, feedback from our sales teams, see how the actual system operates and works, and being able to then take a feature and cut it out as a microservice and take it out from the monolithic, if you want to call it, system, or the modular system. That's the key. You want to be able to have this flexibility when you design the project, and leave your technology team enough room to kind of play on the different technologies that make sense to solve the problem at hand. And these are a lot of buzzwords. These that we see a lot of customers come to us extremely confused. and try to find a solution that is either composable, either modular, or either microservices. It's not the way I think we should look at it. I think we should, again, like I said, to sum it up, have a platform that actually offers you the flexibility to choose the right implementation for the right problem that you're trying to solve at that point.
Yep. Yeah.
Joe,
yeah.
You know, I look for metaphors to try to describe this stuff. So composable, modular, microservices, really technical terminology. But you know, I think my favorite metaphor right now is, and you can even find this on Google, those televisions that have DVD players built into them and VCRs built into them. That's kind of an example of something that is not modular. It's kind of all in one. And so if it's a DVD player, then all of a sudden you have a Blu-ray or whatever. You can't swap that stuff out. Home audio is componentized, modular, and people live with that stuff. So it's a little easier for them to grasp. So that's why I like it as a metaphor. But, you know, is it signal to noise? You know, it's signal for people who understand those technical terms, but it's being served up oftentimes to a non-technical audience. And that's when it, you know, sort of gets a little bit dangerous and confusing. And it makes non-technical folks struggle with this stuff unnecessarily. I think if you keep, I think, you know, vendors, I would say the bloggers and the vendors' marketing teams would do a little bit better to match their message to the audience and not try to cross over or dazzle a non-technical audience with, you know, some new technical buzzword. I mean, it's a waste. It's like, imagine if your CFO came down and, you know, opened the door where the Scrum team was running and said, "Hey, look, tell me how you can use a carry trade in the next iteration." Like, what are you even talking about? You really have to put it in the audience's terms. So yeah, I think that these three, they are valid, they are real, but the noise comes from, I think, maybe a little bit of an over pivot in messaging. And when I ask myself why, I suspect that it's you know, a new crop of cool modern vendors trying to take their shots at the big old incumbents, because this is really these terms are part of the new generation of tech, and there's still a large legacy install base out there. And I think that my hypothesis is that it's a whole bunch of relatively smaller modern vendors who are trying to chip away at the confidence of these old incumbents. And so I guess, you know, another way to say it is, rather than the signal to noise ratio, I think that there just gets a lot of dust that's kicked up from the banter and bickering, even amongst the technical community. So I've watched people get into practically religious debates on whether it's microservice or macro service or nano service. And if you're a fan of Monty Python and The Life of Brian, there was one sect that was the People's Front of Judea, and the other one that was the Judean People's Front. That's like macro versus or micro versus nano services. Now, is it important for that debate to happen? Yes, behind closed doors, but publicly, I think that there's just a bunch of you know, non-technical folks that could walk away with some fear, uncertainty, and doubt unnecessarily, you know, because of that. Now, what are some other problems with this? And I don't know. I'm trying to not be the cynic, but I think there's a certain amount of perspective that I should be sharing here. Is, and what I'd say is, I do see vendors. You know, let's say like bloggers, journalists aside, I do see vendors quite liberally using that term composable. And, you know, I had one executive at a vendor say, hey, we're composable because we have APIs. And so I had to ask myself, well, why are they saying that? And I think it was because, well, first off, I asked myself, did they say that because their engineers built something entirely new? No, that wasn't it. What I think it was is that it became clear that composable architectures had great merit. They were revered. And suddenly someone convinced their executives, or an executive convinced their people to allow them to just say, well, now we're composable, poof, because we have APIs. But really, I think the hazard there is it can come off as like that Steve Buscemi meme of him holding the skateboard, saying hello, fellow cool kids. It's just not something you want to be too far out ahead of your skis on, because I think it reflects very poorly to just slap buzzwords on your stuff.
So and before we go, I think we have two questions related to this, but I just want to add, Joe, I'm totally with you. I mean, we've seen implementation where it was religiously, like you said, decided that microservices is the way to go, and rather than, again, simplifying, being faster to market, et cetera, what we saw is that every service almost was designed differently, working differently, using different technologies. Imagine just controlling that kind of project, right? Where you're separated into, I think they had over 200 microservices or 300 microservices. And they're written in different technologies by different teams that, yeah, they all agree about how we talk, what we need to talk about, but they implement it differently. And imagine one of those teams disappears, and then you have an issue with that microservice. Just putting simple logic to this. Sometimes if it doesn't make sense, it's just going to make stuff harder, more complex. And we've seen these implementations kind of really fail if they're religiously trying to use the term rather than the actual solving of the problem. Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I think we have two good questions about this right now.
Yeah, so just for, these topics, obviously, we can take each one and talk for an hour at least or more. So, and we have some more topics that we want to discuss. So let's try to keep it as concise as possible so we can go through the topics. To the audience out there, we are also having polls. So we would love to see you responding to that. We have two polls that we launched here for the Headless and Composable modular trends. As far as Headless, 40% of you say it's signal, 60% say it's noise, which is interesting. But also, as far as modular, composable, 80% says it's signals and 20% say it's noise. So it's interesting to see that. Now, we also have questions. So let me quickly go to the questions here. And by the way, you can ask them yourself and you don't have to stay anonymous. Let's see. What is your common experience with TCO related to best of breed, aka composable, and best of suit? Anyone have any opinion on that?
Let me take a crack at this one, Yoav, because I know I'm not going to be able to answer the next one. So with TCO, I've seen better TCO on composable, and I've seen better TCO on suite. But it depends. It depends on the dev team in the company that's running it. And so if you have a dev team that's got modern skills, you can do great with modern tech. But if you're not organized that way, it's going to be an uphill battle. So when I kind of can ask myself this question of, why is there so much of this still old, last generation on-prem stuff in place? And the correlation that I noticed was all the tech in that environment was that same old age. And so in order to make that change and embrace, let's say, new modern composable commerce, very often shops have to make a new modern cloud tech mandate across their entire environment. So it's a little bit like that Jeff Bezos "thou shalt API" or "thou shalt work somewhere else" mandate. But if you mix it, if you don't get the mix right, like if you buy tech that your team can't use, it's a big bowl of hurt.
Thank you, Joe. There's another question, Yoav, that I probably will send your way. Let's see if you have thoughts about this. How much and where do the big ones like SAP, Salesforce, Adobe differ from Composable and microservices? Are they modular in the same way as IE Oro?
Yeah, so again, there's a list there of different vendors, of course, and there are the big ones, and they differ between themselves, right? So just looking at starting from Salesforce, which is a SaaS, almost a solution that is extendable through working in their cloud, et cetera. It's definitely different, right? Because a lot of the what is offered is actually, you can look at it almost as monolithic, exposed through APIs, which we'll talk about, I think, next. And then you kind of build your own on top of it, versus Adobe or Magento, where it's truly modular application, right? That's the way it was designed. And again, it can be consumed in many, many different ways. And of course, SAP is a behemoth that's been around for many, many years and is layered with different technologies. So actually, even though it looks like a single product, it is a bunch of technologies working together. We saw from our experience that a lot of SAP implementations suffer, from this, where you pick up, you roll a rock over and you don't know what to expect on that part of the application. Again, because it's been kind of gathered together from many different solutions. I'll add Salesforce. We've seen that as well, just because a lot of the features is actually either acquisitions or other technologies that are running almost behind the scenes for the user. But when it comes to actually developing or extending it, we see surprises a lot of times, or stuff that's, I need to change this and that's not available, or stuff like that. So those are the kind of things that would differ those two. Adobe uses, again, no secret, we were the ones designing originally Magento, and it does have a lot of the components and stuff that we have at Oro. And I think, again, being able to have complete control with your platform, having the ability to kind of modularize the system, use it as needed, use the features you need, extend them, and even use microservices or Composable where it makes sense. Again, that's the guiding kind of principles that we use in developing platforms. And I think most of the modern platforms kind of follow. So again, just having this list, we can have a whole discussion on that as well. If we look, a lot of them have been around for 20 plus years and are using older technologies. They put some patches on top of it. They try to make it more flexible, more service oriented, et cetera. So we are seeing a lot of work done on all of those platforms to achieve this. And with technology and time and money, anything is solvable. So again, it's just a matter of investment and how hard it will be to use them as such.
Thanks, Yoav. Let's continue to the next topic. The next topic, I think it's what you're gonna allude to, API first, but I'll let Joe comment on this first.
All right, so this is real, but and here's my favorite smart aleck retort to API first. API first means that you wrote the API before the implementation. It does not mean that you have API on the first slide of your sales presentation. And so, there was another question, about, what are the origin of some of these terms? I don't think we're discussing the validity of any of the terms. I think we're discussing that the way people use them, if they use them thoughtfully, then it becomes signal. But if they use the term not thoughtlessly, then it becomes noise. And so it's really incumbent upon the people who are using these terms. They're either going to contribute to the signal or they're going to contribute to the noise. The word, however, every one of these terms is very real. And there's also an art to getting the right term and having it used appropriately. It's very difficult, but that's kind of what we're trying to do here today, which is lay out all these common terms and help folks recognize what it's really supposed to be about versus what it's maybe marketed about or misspoken about. What do you think, Yoav? What do you think of API first, my friend?
Yeah, so again, I completely agree with you that this is a technology pitch again. Many times, we cannot ignore API today. I mean, if you're developing a system and there's no way to expose your business logic in an API manner, sooner than later you'll get stuck. And again, a lot of what I was doing early on at the B2C world was connecting systems, and we were building another kind of great term, middlewares, that are actually connecting multiple systems together. A lot of times we were faced with systems that didn't have API, and we had to use flat files for integrations and stuff like that. So again, those days for new technology are over, right? I mean, we cannot ignore that API is the way to go. That's how usually two systems will interact and talk to each other, consume data from each other, and implement business logic moving forward. That said, especially like I mentioned earlier, in B2B, we are still, we're surprised or shouldn't have been surprised, I guess, that there are still a lot of these archaic systems out there that are still not API based or don't have APIs even covering most or any of their features or data. And again, it's something that we have to learn to work with, right? So again, we're back into building middlewares. We're back into where the e-commerce platform maybe does too much work. But that said, again, if you're developing a new system, if you're working or selecting a new platform, API is a must. Now, back to Joe's point, does it have to be first? And that's a great question. And my answer is no, it doesn't have to be necessarily first, because again, the CFO example that Joe gave earlier, the last thing you want to come back to your CFO and say, when he's asking, so how's the budget going? And we're saying, we're still writing APIs. Can you show something? No, here's a bunch of XML. Nobody's going to be happy in the company. I promise you that. And again, the time to market is going to get hurt by that, because you're going to invest so much time in building this framework or using even a framework to build the API, set them up, etc. And it still doesn't do much work that is usable either to the customers, to the company itself, etc. So again, as much as this is a great kind of trend that we're seeing, that everything has to be exposed through API and supported, that for sure you have to select. If you're selecting new technology to your business, find the application or platform that has a great API coverage. And I will say this, and the API can be extended, which is not something that we have to kind of ignore, because it's something that a lot of time is kind of ignored, especially when we use SaaS platforms where the API is limited. That means you're going to have to do a lot of work later. If your platform can actually extend the API framework or have an API framework that allows you to create new coverage, allows you to create new business logic that is covered through API, that's going to save you a lot of time and money later on. And definitely something that as you build, as you expand on what your solution is, as you offer or modify what you're doing, having the ability to expose that via API is a must. But again, does it have to be first? I'll go more on the noise on that. That's again something more in the technology sales pitch again. But for businesses, I wouldn't say that that's a checkbox that has to be ticked, because you don't care at that point if it's API first or not. As long as you can actually write the API and expose your solution via API so it can be consumed by other companies, by other services, by other solutions, that's the key point that has to be kept in mind.
Great, thanks, Yoav. So again, the audience, we have a poll out asking your opinion. So if you just input that. As of now, it's interesting because we bunched the terms here, API first. I assume, API obviously is a signal first, can be a noise. But as far as what the audience think, APIs, 71% say signal, 29% say noise. I would say that if you ask, if API is something that it's very, very important, I would say probably 100% of the people would say yes. But I assume some people here don't think that it must be first. But anyway, we should clarify it in a further discussions in a later opportunity. But let's go on to the next trend that you want to talk about, low code. Joe, you want to start this one?
Yeah, I did some. So low code is real. Low code is spectacular. Low code is a lot of visual, let's say, think of it as form building, also a sort of like a flow chart where you can flow the logic of the application visually, and you write very little code. But again, this can be wildly misinterpreted, either intentionally or unintentionally. I once got pitched that something was low code because the code you wrote was JavaScript, and I was like, "But guys, it's all code." And they're like, "Yeah, but it's less. It's less code." I'm like, "You could say the same thing about C++. It compiles down into assembly language." So I'm not sure I don't think that word means what you think it means. But I mean, I make that joke because, we're trying to be entertaining here today, but that's a lot of these misunderstandings. A lot of the challenge that I end up addressing with clients that have, these questions has a lot to do with their understanding of the basic concepts. And so I try to give them some basic principles that they can reason through. So, the thing that I'm seeing out there with low code, I get pitched a lot of, we're low code, here's our page builder, which is like a WYSIWYG page builder. Now we've had those for years, right? I would say that, yeah, low code is real. There's a lot happening in that space. It's pretty remarkable, actually. John Bratnisevich and I did some research. We found a lot of low code platforms that are industry specific. We talked with a group of folks that had a low code platform for just for financial services. So traders, agents, that kind of stuff. It's got to be fast, flexible, super low latency, because you're talking about moving money. So it is very real, but I think it's a concept it's probably a little bit better understood than like API first, but I still see a few instances of folks taking liberties with it. Yoav, what do you think?
Yeah, I think low code is nothing new. I agree with you, Joe. I mean, I've been working with systems in the 90s and that were application generators. Promise of low code or just drag. I mean, back then we wouldn't call it drag and drop, but it's a lot of configuration that you would run and then get the working application. And again, I think it's nothing new. There's constantly an effort in the technology world to kind of remove the need to write code to solve a problem. Low code is the promise for that. I think here, again, we've seen great, categories where this was very successful. CMSs, right? I mean, we take it for granted today, but building a website without writing a line of code, right? That is a low code implementation, and some of them are great and work really, really awesome. I think, again, what we're seeing is that in the B2B specifically, we're not there yet where somebody can come and design a zero code application yet. We're seeing that it's still being figured out. We see that too much differences between implementations where we can promise somebody that they will not write a line of code yet. I think the industry is not there yet. I think there's a lot to learn before we can write a true zero code application. And when I'm saying that, again, it doesn't mean it doesn't have a WYSIWYG. It doesn't mean you cannot build or design a page. I think it goes deeper where the business logic starts getting involved. And we touched about it with APIs. In B2B, there's so many systems talking to each other. So a lot of times the code that you'll have to write is about the integrations. And Oro provides, for example, what we call a workflow engine that is designed to actually low code all your business flows and processes. But where we see that there's still work that needs to be done is connecting the systems together, right? So again, a lot of times it's not all or nothing in terms of I need a platform that's zero code or low code. to do all my work. I think a lot of times there is still a setup where the feature in the end, when it will be delivered to the project or to the customer, will be a low code, meaning that there's enough configuration based on the business logic and processes that need to be configured. There's a way to do that in a way that is a WYSIWYG or like a drag and drop kind of style. But again, focus on the ones that matter, meaning that not the whole system has to be zero or low code. We have to look at what matters for the business. There is where we need to invest, and then build a solution that will not allow the customer to shoot themselves in the foot when they're trying to configure something, right? Because especially in B2B, the processes are very, very complex. We're seeing that unlike in B2C, we're seeing that the customers sometimes have different processes and are using the user experience differently between each other. So that's where it matters. We want to have a new customer onboarded as fast as possible. We don't need to necessarily involve a technology team or developers to write the code for them. And we need it to be maintainable and extendable as we move forward. So again, low code, yes, where we need it. But again, it should not be something that we religiously pick, especially if we want to do a lot of customization moving forward.
You know, you brought up a really great point about separate out the other flows from the integration. Because what I see a lot in B2B is, you know, I'll ask, well, why are you doing it that way? Well, it's because of some integration behind the scenes, and that's why it got complex. But with that aside, and that's something that you can really only have coders do. But when, like, the real benefit of low code is how it can bring about this citizen developer. And a citizen developer is like a business analyst who knows the complexities of the business. Okay, they did their training there. They spend their days understanding that stuff, but they're not skilled up to be coders, and so they can think about the business problem and then move, you know, big blocks around, just like they would draw on a flowchart on a whiteboard. And that's really the talent that you're unlocking. It's not about saving coders. It's about unlocking the talent and the brilliance inside of all these business analysts. That's what it's about.
No, absolutely. And I'll say this because it's going to sound funny, but if I look back at a lot of the implementations we were doing, even at Magento here at Oro, what we're actually building, what we're actually coding for our customers is low-code features, meaning that once it's established, we're basically building a configurator for them, or we're basically building some configuration points for them where they can actually work without writing code. But a lot of times it's exactly what you said, Joe. It's about identifying what they need control over rather than everything, right? Because everything is so complex to set up. We've seen systems that were low code, zero code, and just setting them up takes longer than writing a code to solve the problem. So again, sometimes that's the problem, but where it matters for the business, exactly where the business analysts say, look, we change this often, or different customers or different salespeople need different features, and we need to enable, disable it based on the role or based on the process that they're in right there. That's where we should invest in the solution to allow them to have a low-code configurator or drag-and-drop system. So completely agree with you on that.
Okay, so I think we'll have time for one more, even though we have way more than that. But this is something that I think we hear a lot in the market today, marketplaces. And Yoav, I'll let you start. What do you think about marketplaces today?
So specifically in B2B, I'll touch on that. I think marketplaces is something we're seeing as a trend. I think we're getting more and more requests to build marketplaces using Oro, so that's definitely growing. I'll leave the stats to Joe when he talks, but it's definitely a growing trend. We're seeing this more and more being requested. I do want to kind of say that in B2B, marketplaces are almost, I won't say it has the full feature, but we're seeing a lot of times that it's not called marketplaces. But if we even look at I'll say the base cases of B2B distributors, right? A distributor actually shares a lot of the features of what marketplaces have, in terms that they have multiple sellers, they have multiple buyers that need access to the system. And I think this is the key when we're talking about B2B, before I talk about marketplaces, is that in a B2B, we have to solve these features, meaning that we have multiple buyers, multiple sellers. That's just reality. Now, moving forward from there, I think before we get to marketplaces, we also see a lot of implementations that use a reseller model or a franchise model. And again, they start sharing a lot of what marketplaces promise or need to have in order to solve that. So again, where I'm going with that is that B2B and marketplaces is not completely isolated implementations, features, etc. They actually share a lot of them and the requirements, like I said, to actually solve one or the other. When we come to marketplaces, I think that a lot of times, a lot of companies are coming with the idea that they have to have a marketplace. And sometimes we tell them you already have a marketplace. Like I said, you already have multiple sellers that have access to the system and post their own products. And when an order comes in, we need to split it to them, et cetera, et cetera. So they already share a lot of what marketplaces features need. But what we're seeing is that, again, a lot of these companies don't understand the complexity of running a marketplace. Meaning, and most of it is not on the technology, on the solution. It's how your business operates. Who offers the customer support? Who gives the customer service? Is it going to hurt your brand if one of your vendors is going to give a poor customer experience to your customer? So there's a lot of questions that have to be asked here. I think the days of I need an Amazon for $5,000 are not there yet as well. So we're seeing a lot of companies trying to get into marketplaces without understanding the complexity on their side, the complexity of the technology, the complexity that will take them to actually be a successful marketplace. And I think that's something that I would still say it's happening, but I think we're early on in a lot of companies understanding how marketplaces fit into their current business and operations at this point.
Hey, Joe, I'll let you have the final word here on marketplace, and then we close it up.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, marketplace. It's less about the tech, because I think there's a good amount of tech out there right now. But marketplace is a different business model, and it's I work with some clients who saw marketplace. They looked at it from a technology perspective. There's so much more. You have to code your revenue differently because you're getting commission revenue. You have different opportunities because once you hit a certain scale, then you can start making money from marketing and advertising services. In a lot of B2B companies, they would have non-stocked items, and they've done that for years. Very similar, folks would use dropship, or like, how would you effectively manage an assortment where you have a mixture of fast-moving and slow-moving SKUs? How would you manage that long tail? And I think, when I talk to folks who operate marketplaces, the one thing they tell me repeatedly was, I thought I could take my first-party buyers and make them third-party recruiters, and they can't. It's a very different skill set. And so marketplace technology aside affects the business model, how you make money, and the operational requirements around it. It is real, and I would say that in terms of the trend, because there's more transformation that's required in the business, it's just more difficult, or it's a more ambitious undertaking. Those provide some headwinds to adoption. So I don't think that it is going to go away. I think that it has real value, and that's being proven out. It just takes a lot of effort, and so that's why the adoption curve is sort of stretched out a bit.
And I know we're running out of time, so I'll keep it really short. I think that really you need to separate between businesses that are marketplaces. That's what they do. Right. Like Joe said, they know how to do this, that this is what they're doing, and they're looking for technology or changing and modifying what they're doing. We're seeing a lot of businesses that go from the listing kind of marketplace where they just list product and send them, to have interaction somewhere else, that are trying to bring it all into online today, versus companies that are, and big brands that are trying to enable a marketplace because they think that will be, and I think that's where you start hitting a lot of landmines. If you think that your business can transform into a marketplace easily, that's not the case. I think I agree with you on that. if your business is a marketplace, yeah, you search for the right solution to solve what you need.
Well, if you have done it easily, please give me a call. I would love to see it possible.
Yeah, from our experience, we didn't see any, marketplace that it's really easy. But it's definitely interesting, and it's an interesting business model that we are getting involved in, and we see the trends going up. This is basically, we are on the top of the hour, and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. There are some more questions and comments from the audience. We'll get back to you. This session was recorded, so we'll share it with you. We were very excited to share the first podcast in the B2B Uncut series. We're going to have more of those, and we hope you join in. We hope that we provide you with some food for thoughts, right? It's not a clear cut. And as Joe said, you're not taking your neighbor medicine just because it made him feel better. You need your own one. So think about it, and make sure that, you get the right help to select the tools that you need to get through your business transformation and get your strategy in place and execute it so your business will be successful. So thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And looking forward to see you again. Thanks.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye.